I feel like the Bay doesn't get the credit it deserves in hip hop. Do you feel the same?
100%. I think most of us in the Bay Area feel that way. I've thought about this a lot, and I think and I'm a hip hop historian. I'm not just a Bay Area cat. I love hip hop in general, and you got to give it up to the cats in the Bronx and New York City that helped start this. The thing about New York City is that it's not only the birthplace of hip hop, it's where a lot of these labels and entertainment companies and theater companies, it's where a lot of media comes from. So I feel like it makes sense that a lot of the spotlight from early on in hip hop, it wasn't on the South, it wasn't on the West Coast at first, it was on New York and the East Coast. Eventually, the West Coast did take off as well, mostly LA artists. And the reason for that is the same, I would say. It's that's where the labels are.
Yeah.
That's where the movies are made. That's where TV is made. The thing is that there actually was a period in the early 90s when major labels were looking at the Bay Area. You had E40 on a major label. You had Too Short, Spice One, The Coup, Souls of Mischief, Dell, Casual, all these guys from Hieroglyphics on major labels. There's probably many more. I can't. The Loonies, Drew Down, all these guys signed major label deals. For one reason or another, it seemed like that major label interest kind of trickled off, and I do think a big reason of that is regional. Like, just like I said, the fact that the labels are in LA. But to really go back to the question, I think it's messed up that we don't get the credit because there's so many artists from the beginning, like literally Too Short in the early 80s. So many Bay Area artists that have impacted hip hop culture. And to this day, there's so much talent that comes out of the Bay Area. You know, you've seen a lot of the stuff on Twitter, like people complaining. People from the Bay think that everything came from there. We did. We did pioneer. Not everything, but we pioneered
a vast majority.
A lot of stuff, man. And it's not, and it's so many different styles. Like I said, you got everybody from E40 to Hyro to The Cool to so many different styles of music have come out of the Bay Area. So many impactful rappers, producers, even people on the industry side. And I think like just now in the last few years, you're starting to see the South become one of these other major hubs. The South was disrespected for a long time too and wasn't getting props. I feel like the Bay Area, there's a few cats that have broken out of the box, but in terms of understanding what we've really contributed to hip hop, I don't think the industry has done that yet.
No, and I like that answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to summarize, it's more so the infrastructure that we lack here in the Bay Area that kind of stagnates us a bit.
I would say so. Yeah, I would say so. I mean, you got to think, man, like if you're rapping in New York in the late 80s, early 90s, you could take the train to Midtown and try to walk up in some of these big offices.
Literally just open the door and say, I got a meeting with whoever.
Yeah. And a lot of cats did. They bogarted their way in the door like that. If you're in LA in the early days rocking at some open mic, you never know. Some executive might just be there at the bar having a drink and hear you. It's not quite like that in the Bay, but we created our own infrastructure independently. And the thing about the Bay is not just one city. It's a huge region of all these different cities, all these different areas that we've been able to capitalize on independently. And that's why we have our own thing going on here that's kind of like pure and uncut. You know what I mean?
Okay. So as far as, you know, just the trajectory of the Bay Area and the music scene from, like, let's say the early 90s, how do you feel like it's changed since not the start, but just since the early 90s and like the emergence of Bay Area artists and the independence? Like, has it changed or has it progressed, or does it still feel like it's in the same state?
I think it changed a lot. I think you had, in the early 90s, you had cats that started off independently, like 40 and Short, that were able to transition into major labels. And then you had, like I said, you kind of had a lot of major label interests, or a lot of cats got deals, but then a lot of cats also got dropped, or it just didn't work out. The labels didn't know how to package them, and it forced them to go back into the underground and to be independent. I think a big hit that the whole music industry took, and the Bay Area, was in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the illegal downloading hit, the CD market dried up. People didn't really know, what to do with the situation changing with music. And now we're in the internet era. And now there's a lot of Bay Area cats. There's a lot of young artists that are able to market themselves really well on the internet, but it's not quite the same understanding of how to get this money.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Like something as simple as just monetizing
and taking advantage of the soil. Like I said, you got San Jose, Frisco, Richmond. You got all these different cities. You can go city to city and get money. Not just on the internet.
Yeah.
And also the whole idea of like being a tycoon, being like a Master P or like a 40 or a JT the Bigger Figure. I feel like that aspect is kind of lacking a little bit.
Like the self-sufficiency.
The self-sufficiency and the business tycoon, like that industry mind state of not just, all right, I'm going to rap and get some streams and get some shows. And like, nah, how am I going to build an independent empire? I don't think there's too many cats thinking like that nowadays.
Right.